Hi, Kayan here, and I have a new product I'm excited to try that I've been saving to try with you, and it is the Niji Gouache. I've never tried this brand before, nor have I heard much about it, so I thought I'd give them a try and let you know what I think about them. I'm getting ready to do a folk art and gouache workshop, and so I thought this would be fun to let my participants in the workshop try something new as well, but I want to give it a try first so that I can kind of give them a heads up. It says that it is opaque watercolor for design and illustration, has 12 colors, smooth and creamy, matte finish, and fade resistant. So that all sounds great. It wasn't I think the price on these are not real high, so we'll see what we think. It comes in this nice sturdy little plastic box, and the lid of it actually is a palette. It's got little divisions in it, so I'm going to set my ceramic palette aside and use the one that it came with. Looks like a fairly standard set of 12 colors, and they are in little jars, and I think the premise of these is that unlike gouache from the tube that needs water added to get just the right consistency, that these are ready to use, which would make them a little bit more beginner friendly, because one of the tricky things about gouache is getting the right amount of water with it to be the consistency you want. That said, one of the things I like about gouache is the versatility of using it full strength, very opaque, and diluting it with water and having more of a watercolor look. So as I'm swatching these, I'm trying them both ways. I had already started painting some snowflakes on this page, so I just decided to jump in there and just continue on using this gouache. I'm working in a Strathmore mixed media hardcover sketchbook, which is one of my favorites for wet media. This first color that I swatched is their sky blue. And then the next color is just red. These colors don't have very specific names like what kind of red or anything like that. So they just call it a red. To me, it's a little bit of a cool red. Has a little hint of some blue undertones in it. And I've just decided, since I'm swatching several colors, to just make some colorful snowflakes here in kind of a colorful folk art style tradition, I hope. I'm using a number 5 round brush, which is just a student grade brush. It keeps me from getting too detailed with this and keeping them somewhat loose, which is my goal. I don't want to be like crazy detailed in these snowflakes, which you could easily do, but just kind of keep it loose and fun and easy. It probably would have served me to draw some pencil guidelines first, but I didn't. I'm just kind of freehanding these and just having a little playtime with them. This next color is simply called purple, and again I'm just swatching like an opaque little patch and then a watercolor or a watered down version of it as well. In the diluted version, it makes this really pretty kind of lavender color that I use in my snowflake. As you can see, I have added a yellow, which is they actually have two yellows in this set, and this is the lighter yellow, which they call lemon yellow. And I have added it to my swatches and am also to my snowflake. And I'm also started doing a bit of layering of colors on this snowflake just to see how well they layer. Now, to be fair, the first layer was maybe not entirely dry, but also with traditional gouache, it will blend as you add other layers because the paint reactivates when you get it wet. So I find that you have to use it fairly dry to add extra layers on top. And here I have mixed that red with some white gouache, and which is I often do. I often add some white in, just kind of increases that opacity and gives it a little like a pastel color. And it's those colors that are kind of hard to achieve with like watercolor, say. So I'm adding in some of those pastel layered tones into my snowflake now. I'm kind of drawn to being more detailed with these, and so I'm just adding, anytime there's a little space, I just add another little mark in there. The other thing is the repetition and doing things like symmetrical. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but that idea of being symmetrical is there, where I repeat whatever mark I make in each section, each quadrant. And even though if you look close, they're not very uniform, the overall effect, I think, is a pleasing one. I'm using the light green now, which is kind of, I would call it maybe kind of an apple green or something like that. It is a very pretty and fairly bright color of green, and works well by itself in contrast with these other colors. So I'm calling that first snowflake complete, and am just moving on to do another one now. I'm drawing those that initial plus sign to just kind of give me something to go by as I make my snowflake. And I don't really have any plan at this point. I just start making marks along that, and then I'm going to add an X through the plus sign just to add another dimension to the snowflake, and just start playing along those grid lines. I can see that using actual graph paper or a light grid, paper with a light grid like in the Hobonichi or something like that, would probably be really helpful doing this, and maybe I should give that a try. But for now, I'm just going to play with these on this sketchbook paper. Going back in with some of the red to add to the green color, the light green, and adding more marks. Again, I'm not planning this out ahead. I'm just kind of going with it, and whatever mark I make in one area, I make sure I do it in all 4, if not all 8. These snowflakes look kind of intimidating in the finished result, but as you can see, they're really very simple and easy to do. The color I'm using now is the dark green, which I put on the palette, and is actually more of, I think, more of a teal color. And then I've mixed it with the white, and it makes this really pretty kind of turquoise blue color that I'm using right now. And here I'm swatching that dark green. You can see the difference between it and the light green. This is a much bluer green. Again, I would call this more of a teal color. This next color I'm swatching is called Vermilion, and it's a pretty, really pretty lovely orange or orangish red. And I really like this color. When it dries, it actually looks a bit kind of corally, a coral bit of color, and as it dries, especially in the watered down version. I have the idea to turn these snowflakes into little date date blocks that my patrons get and a lot of people use in the planner community to put dates on their pages. And so I'm also making some numbers on this page as well. I have 1 through 4 on the previous page. I'm just continuing with that to get the rest of the numbers. I'm also jumping back to the snowflakes I had already started on the previous page and just decide that they would be much better if I added a little bit more detail to them. So I'm going back and doing that, sprucing them up a little bit, and also seeing how well this gouache layers on top of other gouache and watercolor. And I would say straight out of the jar, they're pretty nice and opaque, so which is what you want. All in all, I think these are very easy to use for ease of use, because they are just ready to use out of the little jar. And unlike the tube gouache where you need to, get it the right consistency, ready to paint by mixing some water in, these are just ready to go. So jumping ahead, I've pretty well filled up the page now, and I'm just filling in little white spaces with some little embellishments. I always think it's handy to have little embellishments like this to use on a journal page or something, and so with in mind that this will probably become a sheet that my patrons can use, or at least parts of it will, I thought making some little embellishments would be a fun and useful thing too. This was really a fun project for swatching out these colors and seeing how they play with each other and how they work and how they layer. And I'm glad that I just happened to be working on this page and picked that to continue on with this gouache. It's a pretty fun play session and helped me become more familiar with these paints. The one last thing I want to do before I leave this page is to compare it to, I'm using Winsor & Newton white gouache. I always need more white than I do the other colors of gouache just because I do so often mix it in. I'm also checking here, I want to see how well its opacity is, the white is, as I layer it over these other colors. So here I'm using straight from the jar and trying it over the other colors. And then I'm using the Winsor & Newton from the tube and diluting it just a little and painting it on top. I will say the Winsor & Newton is more opaque, which is not surprising because it is tube paint versus these in these little pots. It's also a more expensive, I would say, paint than these little Niji Gouache, but the Niji holds its own. I think it compared relatively well. So the final thing I want to do here is create what I call a little folk art sampler. And what I've done that you can't really see here is drawn some very light pencil lines in the shape of a triangle, kind of a Christmas tree shape, just a basic triangle. And I'm going to fill it in, just making kind of some mark making folk art style, just playing around, see with what I come up with. So now I'm mixing the colors together. I'm not using them just straight out of the bottle like I pretty much did on the snowflakes. And so I'm mixing some greens with red to kind of neutralize them a little bit. I'm just painting, using them as I would to paint an illustration. Like the snowflakes, I've not really planned this out other than drawing that basic triangle shape. And so I'm just having fun, whatever mark and colors inspire me in the moment. That's what I'm doing, and I'm just going to see where I end up with this. finding this relaxing and enjoyable. Right now I'm just using some little leaf shapes as a filler, and that's the main goal, is to just fill up this triangle with kind of symmetrical mark making. And I'm not even worried about it being perfectly symmetrical, just basically whatever happens on one side happens on the other side, and but keeping it a little bit organic as well, and just working very intuitively here. When I feel like it's time to switch colors, I switch colors and don't give a lot of planning or forethought to it. I feel like the colors are very vivid, and that's something that's pretty enjoyable. They can always be muted down, but you can't make them more vivid if they're not. So I'm really enjoying the intensity of these colors, and they are very smooth and creamy. Just overall, I'm pretty impressed with them. I don't know much about I'm not seeing information about light fastness or anything like that. I'm assuming they are probably not terribly light fast, but I don't worry about that too much in my sketchbook, and the illustrations that I'm making with it will be reproduced digitally, and these will not be originals for sale. So for illustrative work, I think these are a winner. now that I have finished the piece with using gouache, I am now going in with colored pencils and layering on top. As a mixed media artist, it's important to me how a material not only works by itself, but also how it plays with other materials. And so I'm trying it now with a colored pencil on top, and it does seem to be working well. It receives the colored pencil well, which doesn't surprise me, being a nice matte surface here to work on. I'm mainly using the colored pencil to tidy up a bit, as well as add some details. And here's the finished result. I zoom in here a little bit so you can see it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.